As Colette said, I'll tell you a little bit about the Corney Barrow White Burgundy. So here we go, if you can see that properly. So that's 2018, it's a Maison Village. And of course, it goes without saying that we wouldn't put our name to anything that we didn't 100% believe in. So the fact that it has a Corney Barrow label on it tells you a lot already. So Maison Village, as many of you I'm sure will know, is from the southern part of Burgundy. So a continental climate, so cold winters, warm summers. They tend not generally to have the ripening issues that they have in other parts of Burgundy. And the producer here is a family called Maison Auvigue. Corney Barrow have worked with Maison Auvigue for a long time, but it's only in the last 3 years that we've been working with them to create our own label. And what happens here is that our head buyer, Rebecca Palmer, goes out to the winery and works with the family who are based in Puy-et-Fouissé. That's just around the Roche-Solutré, which is a big limestone rock that sits, and you can see it for miles in the area. And Rebecca goes out and works with the family to create a wine that is consistent and reliable and really typifies this part of Burgundy and the specific vintage. So what we have is kind of a wine that's a pale gold in colour, and then on the nose there's some lovely floral notes and some maybe dried apricots as well. There's a little bit of richness there. 2018 was a pretty hot vintage. It was high in quality and in quantity. There's just a little bit of oak on the wine. This is the first vintage in which they've used any oak whatsoever, but just a little hint. And most of the wine is made up of 3 villages. And the ratio of each one varies depending on the vintage, so that we can get this really consistent style. Burgundy, we know, is delicious. However, it's also extremely expensive in many cases. And so this wine's $14.25 full price. So that's a really good bargain in terms of Burgundy. And if you're feeling generous, it also comes in magnums. So that's a good one to remember, especially, I know Christmas is still a while away, but you know, you can get in early and buy some magnums. But in terms of the palate, if you take a swig, I don't know how many of you actually have the wine in your glass at the moment, but it's quite light. But it's got lovely structure, really nice texture, and I think it's a really food-friendly wine. It's a great wine as an introduction to white Burgundy, and maybe even to people who think they don't like Chardonnay. There's lots of citrus fruit and quite a long finish, touch of spice on both the nose and then on the palate as well, and really nicely balanced, which is exactly what we're looking for something that has the Corney Barrow name on it, something well balanced, well put together, and value for money at the same time. A real classic. So this is something that Rebecca has been doing for a few years with the Auvigue family, with 2 brothers, and there's a nephew involved as well, and a lady winemaker, Celine Hirsch, and they produce this wine together. Because it's right down in the south, so in contrast to Chablis way up in the north, and the Côte d'Or in the middle, the extra sunshine and the ripeness really helps, and they tend not to need, they're used to picking relatively early and managing that balance of phenolic ripeness and acidity. And so I think particularly in a year like 2018 when it's really hot, I think they manage that really well because they're accustomed to those temperatures a little bit better than perhaps they might be elsewhere. We've been working with Maison Auvigue for over 20 years, I believe, and there are 2 main wines that we buy from them. There's a Puy-et-Fouissé and a Maison Solutré, and the Maison Solutré has been in our portfolio for a long time, and it's a real stalwart within the portfolio. So that relationship goes back a long way. I think the winery started in 1946, but we've been dealing with them for about 20 years. And but the own label thing is only the last, I think this is the third vintage that we've done with them as own label. I think it's quite light, although there's lots of texture in the wine. It's not terribly, it's not heavy in any way. So I think some lovely shellfish or seafood would be great. The North Uist langoustine that the gatherers were showing last weekend, I think they would also go really well with this, or a chicken salad or something like that. Nothing too overpowering. You want the wine to show through.
I think you could also probably drink it on its own as well.
Absolutely, it's definitely fresh enough to do that. Yeah. Well, this one until now has been unoaked. I think coming from the Macomb, the fruit ripens really well, so you don't necessarily need oak. And you know, we're trying to showcase a style that is ripe but still fresh and lighter in style by oak aging it more. Then it would definitely make for a fuller style and something much creamier. And there's a touch of creaminess in this one, but maybe it's a stylistic choice. If you want to make something creamier, then you would age it further in oak, and then the choice would be, well, of course, it'd be French oak in this part of the world.
We are going to be tasting PSI or PSI, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Just to tell you about the name, actually, because it's PSI, but P for Peter and SI for Sisek, who is the winemaker and owner of and the leader on this project. And it's also the Greek letter, which I don't know if you can see here, really matches is very similar to an old bush vine. So that's a little bit on the label. And so Peter Sisek, for people who don't know, we've been working with him since 95, or at least from his first vintage with the Dominio de Pingus 95. He is originally Danish and has done several years in Bordeaux with his uncle, Peter Vindendiers, who is also a winemaker. And actually, it's thanks to his uncle that Peter got to go to the Ribera del Duero, because his uncle asked him to go out there and sort of assess the area and to see if there was potential. Peter fell in love in some ways with the region and discovered there was a lot of potential. So he first started his project, which was Dominio de Pingus, where he created his first wine called Pingus, which happens to be his nickname from when he was a child. And then from there he went on to do Flor de Pingus, his second wine, and finally, in 2007, or a little bit before, but 2007 being the first vintage, for the 2017 vintage, they actually have sourced it from 27 villages, and it comes from 841 small plots, because their average yield was very, very small compared to what they probably would be doing normally. The blend is 97% Tempranillo, or it can also be called Tinto del País, and 3% Garnacha, which helps and gives you some richness and some softness to the wines. So on the nose is that you get some red fruits, so like cherries, some cranberries, but you also get dark chocolate, I find, and a bit of graphite. And on the palate is like really soft, and the tannins are smooth, and I mean, it's still fairly young, so you've got a little bit of grippiness, but it's, you know, it's very ripe tannin, and it's rich. And what do you think, Leva? Because you've got it as well, in you've tasted it. So
I think
would you
you're
agree?
right. It's although it's young, it's definitely approachable now. It's, you know, you could easily drink this. I think it will age fine, but it's yeah, just a bit of breathing, a bit of opening up, and it's ready to go, I think. Yeah,
I think so too.
Ready for tea tonight.
This vintage particularly, I wouldn't think so. I think I probably would leave it more in the glass, you know, and to air it from there. But otherwise, I mean, so, you know, when you look at red Burgundy, normally they don't, you know, producer will tell you don't decant it. So and this, I think you more often would decant when you've got likely to have sediment, or for a very old wine. I mean, it can of course help, and if you've got a very nice decanter and you want to show off to your friends, you know, and to be able to put it on the table, then by all means, you know, do it. It shouldn't do it any harm, I would have thought. So I forgot to mention is that he also, you know, he's gone back to produce wine in Bordeaux with Chateau Rocheron. So who knows, he might end up, you know, deciding to produce wine in Denmark.